Okay, we're going to get started while more participants link in. I'm Safwan Masri, Executive Vice President for Global Centers and Global Development at Columbia University. And it really is a great pleasure to welcome all of you, our audience members from all over the world, and our distinguished panelists, Catherine Solon, Esther Fuchs, and Tom Trebat, whom I will introduce more fully in a couple of minutes. This is an incredibly important topic, a very timely topic, perhaps more necessary than ever before, at least in my lifetime, for a couple of reasons. One is that these US elections are, perhaps the most consequential, the most important, again, at least in my lifetime, that I have witnessed. And two, because of the difficulties in voting, given the COVID crisis and the fact that many of us are perhaps stranded all over the world, and even in the United States, the reliance on mail-in ballots and absentee ballots for people like myself is really has put us in a position where we really need all the help that we can get. I personally have found myself away from New York, typically on election day, but I never had a problem getting my absentee ballot and filling it out before I left the United States. But now I'm in Jordan, where I've been since March, and I would say that one of the most anxiety-causing issues that I have had over the past few weeks has been about getting the chance to vote. Let me just say a couple of quick words about the global centers. We are in 9 cities around the world: Amman, Istanbul, Tunis, Mumbai, Beijing, Nairobi, Paris, Santiago, and Rio de Janeiro. And these global centers really act as outposts of the university that engage our faculty, students, and alumni in important conversations like this one, and in research and education activities. So we're delighted to be hosting through the Global Centers this important event. And over the next couple of months, we will have a series of other events having to do with the elections. Your presence today, the participants' presence today, is really testimony to the value you place in democracy and your belief that every vote matters, and in the power of 3 simple words: we, the people. The reality of democracy and the role that our voting system plays in it is, to quote Thomas Jefferson again, we do not have government by the majority, we have government by the majority who participate. And as a naturalized citizen of the United States, I can also relate to that in a very significant way. None of us should take the power that we have to participate and impact the future the way that we do with voting. So thanks again for being here, for making sure you participate, no matter the distance between you and your hometown ballot box. We will be covering a lot of ground today, starting with the fascinating history of overseas voting, sharing personal perspectives on what the process can be like, and most importantly, giving you practical, real-world advice on how you can make sure your voice is counted. Before we begin, I want to share with you Columbia University's long-standing commitment to helping ensure that every student has the resources and the opportunity to vote, including a 40-year tradition of offering Election Day as an institutional holiday. We do this not as a political statement, as we do not support or oppose candidates for office. We do this because of a shared commitment to creating, to participating in the world in which we live. So some of the things that the university has been doing: we provide clear information to students, faculty, and staff and others about voter registration deadlines. We have targeted outreach to our students. We have specialized programming like this webinar to address specific questions on voting. We partner with student organizations and departments, academic departments, to better engage students. And we serve as an early voting location in 2 locations at the Columbia University campus, at the Forum, and at the Irvine Medical Center campus. And we have additional resources that are available that you can check out at vote.columbia.edu, which one of my colleagues will now put in the chat room. If you want to get more involved in efforts encouraging voter registration or civic engagement, you can also reach out to ts2968@columbia.edu. Again, my colleagues will put that email address in our chat box. I mentioned earlier that I'm in Jordan, and fortuitously and very, very fortunately, I received actually my ballot by email just this morning. So it is right here in front of me. I will be filling it out and voting today, and I hope that everybody around the world is doing the same thing. Before I introduce our panelists, I just want to remind our audience members to please use the Q&A function that you see at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions that you might have, and we'll try to help you with them. So, our distinguished panelists, I'm going to start with Katie Solon, who has been living and working overseas for more than 3 decades. And for the past 17 years, Katie has been devoted to helping Americans abroad learn they have the right to vote, and navigating how to do it, and helping as an advocate and practitioner to make the process simpler and more doable. Katie works with the Vote from Abroad team, which directs overseas voters to vital voting resources, including access to a 24/7 overseas voter helpline. Votefromabroad.org can be used by any US voter overseas, no matter what country they live in, no matter which state they vote in, and no matter what their political party affiliation is. Tom Trebat is a colleague of mine. He is the director of the Columbia Global Center in Rio de Janeiro. He joined Columbia after a lengthy career on Wall Street dedicated to economic research on Latin America. Tom formerly served as executive director of the Institute of Latin American Studies at Columbia University and of the Institute Center for Brazilian Studies. Prior to joining the Institute for Latin American Studies in February 2005, Tom was managing director and head of the Latin America team in the Economic and Market Analysis Department of Citigroup. Esther Fuchs, nice to see you, Esther. Esther is an old colleague and friend, and she is professor of political science and director of the Urban and Social Policy program at Columbia University's School of International Public Affairs. Esther served as special advisor to the mayor for governance and strategic planning under New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Previously, Esther served as chair of the Urban Studies program at Barnard College and Columbia College, and as founding director of the Columbia University Center for Urban Research and Policy. Welcome to all of you, Esther, Katie, and Tom. And I'm going to start with you, Katie, if you don't mind. Maybe you can give us, given the breadth and depth of your experience, you can share with us a history of voting abroad. How does voting abroad for Americans, for example, differ from what it is like for citizens in other countries trying to vote overseas? Are there special challenges that Americans face? Can you tell us a little bit about the history behind mail-in voting and how the process has changed over time? So if you can give us sort of a historical context, Katie, I think that'll be very helpful.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for holding this important session right now when people are already voting across the United States and around the world, because ballots went out to overseas voters beginning September 19th. And they're going out in many of the states that do early voting across the United States. American citizens have had the right to vote from abroad since 1976. Of course, at the beginning, it was all paper. You received a paper ballot and you needed to mail it back. It has really evolved over these years to become, thank goodness, especially this year, very digital. There are 9 million American citizens that live abroad, according to the State Department. And we estimate that 6.5 million are of voting age. And yet, less than 1 million have voted in any year. Mostly, they're not voting because they don't know they can and they don't know how to. So my organization, votefromabroad.org, is helping to change that by reaching out to Americans and informing them that they can and then how to do it. The good news is more and more Americans abroad are voting every year. There were many more in 2016 than there were in 2008. I'm kind of skipping 2012 because it was the year of an incumbent, so the turnout was lower everywhere. In 2018, you know that across the United States, there was historic turnout for a midterm, for those elections in between the presidentials. 147% increase or turnout, I think, across the United States. Well, for voters abroad, it was a 322% turnout. We just voted in incredible numbers. And it looks like in 2020, we're going to at least double the turnout from 2016. The web tool that we have for voter registration and ballot request is already has been used 3 times as many times as in 2016. We've tripled already our work this year. And the government site, FVAP, the Federal Voting Assistance Program, has already doubled. So we're going to have an amazing turnout abroad. And as you said, every vote matters, every vote counts. The smallest number of votes can really determine elections. Perhaps especially in a year like this when the margins might be very narrow. When the margins are narrow, it's the overseas vote that's going to decide races. So I have a couple of slides to look at. Yes, go ahead. Sorry,
just on that point, sorry to interject, but every vote matters and can help decide the outcome. But there's also something very important and very personal and very cathartic about having your voice heard, especially in an election like this one, right? I mean, there is a very important sort of psychological dimension to it beyond the practical.
Well, yes, of course. And especially I think for someone who's outside the United States, because it really makes, you don't lose your connection or your connection to or your care for your country. And your vote is really the way that you help take care of your country and make sure that you're participating. So I think for people overseas, it's incredibly important. And especially because most of the people that when you live abroad are not US citizens. And many of them are telling you that they would like to vote in your election because we certainly have been learning that decisions that we make in the United States have an amazing, effect around the world. And everybody is watching this election and everybody is interested in it. So, those of us who live abroad and are US citizens, we have that both responsibility and that opportunity to make our voices heard. So I have a couple of slides that I won't go through all of them, but I'd like to show you just the slide, the first one, which shows the process, because I kind of thought that I was going to be asked to show the nuts and bolts of voting. So I was going to talk about the steps, maybe the details and some tools, and the challenges of voting from abroad. But first, let's just look at the next slide if we could, Trevor. Thank you. It's a 3-step process. That's the one right there. It's 3 steps, but I kind of have made it 5 because you need to be persistent if you're voting from abroad, right, Tom, who's going to be talking about his experience. But the 3 steps are, if you are voting from abroad, you must request a ballot every year that you want to vote. I mean, think about that. Think about the turnout in the United States, which is not the highest among all countries. What if everybody who voted every year had to request their ballot? Wow, think about what it would happen to, what would happen to our turnout. But as an overseas voter, you need to send in this form called an FPCA to request your ballot every election year. And then where
do you get the form from?
Kate? You can get the form I'll show you on the next slide. But let's talk about this government form, federal postcard application. You need to send it in. You can send it in by email to almost every state, but not all of them. The second step is to then receive the ballot, and you can do that by mail or email. But when you are an overseas voter using that request form, you have the right to receive it by email. And that is critical, especially this year with the way the post is running and everything else in many countries as well as the US. So you receive the blank ballot, and we urge everybody this year to have it be sent to you by email. And then the third step is to send it back. And then you need to do that this year by the speediest method your state allows. So if we look at first I'll say, why do I make it 5 steps? Because every year, but especially this year, you should follow up with your local election official by phone or by email. And once you send in the request, follow up and make sure they got it and you're on the list. That would be, another step. And then after you send in the ballot, follow up, either track the ballot with one of the tracking methods that you can use in your state, or again, email or phone your local election official and make sure the ballot got there. Now in some states, they're picking up the phones and answering immediately. I'm in Arizona and they're doing a fantastic job. In some other states, you might have a problem getting anyone to answer the phone. Think about it. There's a lot of volume. There's a lot of change this year. There's a lot of chaos. There are some people not showing up for work. So we've got some busy local election officials who, for the most part, are really doing their best to run elections. So where to get this form? I think it's on the next slide, Trevor. Let's hope. No, first some more details, and then I'll tell you where to get the form. I'll go quickly. There are only a few of these. First of all, sending in this form to your county every election year. All right, in Louisiana, it's a parish, and in New Hampshire, it might be a township, but it's your local election office. Your voting state is usually, but not always, but usually the state where you last lived. Now, the deadlines and the laws vary by state. You can use this form for every state, but the way you fill it out depends on what state you're sending it to. The deadlines are different than if you were voting from within the United States. In most states, you can send that request in by email. In all states, I'll repeat, you can get the blank ballot by email. And in more than half of the states, you can submit your voted ballot electronically. I'm going to skip the federal write-in absentee ballot, or I'm only going to say that if your own ballot doesn't arrive from your state, but you have requested it on time, following the rules, you can use a write-in ballot. So now, Trevor, the next slide is going to tell us where we can get that form and answer Safwan's question. There's a couple places to get it. We really urge you to fill it out online so that it's legible and so that you answer the questions that you need to answer for your state, because they will automatically pop up when you fill it out online. So the first source here is fvap.gov, the Federal Voting Assistance Program in the Department of Defense. They're the agency of the US government responsible for overseas voting. They have the form online now, and you can go right there and fill it out. It's got 1 star by its name. You can get help from FVAP by phone or email. You leave a voicemail and they will get back to you. And they're very reliable. The second source here is Overseas Vote Foundation, which is a nonprofit with civilians and military and Republicans and Democrats on their board. They're also excellent. You can get help if you need it with their FAQs or submit a written question. And then number 3 is the group that I work with. And we're the first group to have put this form online, votefromabroad.org. We also have FAQs to help you. What we have that nobody else has is a 24/7 help desk. There's a little red bubble on every screen. You click on that bubble, you write your question, and especially now, someone's going to get back to you relatively quickly to answer your question. You can also go to some websites for some states and find the information you need to request your ballot or register. Or you could just go to the FVAP site, download a hard copy of the form, fill it out, make sure that you can read your writing, and make sure that you follow the instructions for your state on the site. So that's how you get the form. Yes, Safwan.
So yeah, I just want to underscore this. So that's exactly what I did. Got the form from the FVPA website, downloaded it, filled out. the voter information form, right?
Yeah.
Which I then emailed, because I'm registered in New York City, I emailed according to the instructions there to voter reg, so VOTERREG at
Yeah.
BOE for Board of Election,
Yeah.
.nyc.ny.us.
Right.
I sent it to them, then I followed up again, and then I mailed them. I had my assistant in New York print it out and mail it to them. And it took 2 weeks, but as I said this morning, I got it. And I know Hala Ibrahim I'm going to start answering questions as we go along. Hala wants to know where to get the ballot by email. Hala, this is how you do that, okay? This is how you do that. Another person wanted to know if we're recording this, because that person has to leave early. So to all the participants, yes, we are recording it, and everybody who registered will get a link to the recording in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Please go on, Katie.
All right. Well, I would be happy also if you would share my slides with anyone so that they don't have to feel that they need to write down all of these links or this information. So
Great.
if you're going to be sending those out later. And I would imagine that many of the voters that might be listening are New York voters from abroad. And there's some special things going on in New York. So I'd be happy to talk about New York in particular, or to share this information in writing. But the most important thing is to read the instructions that come with your ballot and follow them, because they could differ borough by borough or county by county in New York. So make sure that you follow the instructions, and know that there's a lot of voters in New York and there's a lot of voters from abroad. But a couple of things that happened in New York is some wrong envelopes were sent out, and then this was corrected. At the beginning, when you tried to download your ballot, they sent out passwords and they sent the wrong ones, but they immediately corrected that. And then most lately, they sent out, or acknowledged that they sent out, some incorrect ballots in some counties. And they've sent an email saying that a new ballot would come. But now they have just decided that if you would like to only vote the original ballot, in most cases you would have already voted it and sent it in, you don't need to vote the corrected ballot. If you do not submit that one and you have submitted the original will be counted. So this is news that we just got yesterday. So, and then finally, that request form, the FPCA, in New York, you can send it in by email, but then you need to send the hard copy in if you want your vote to be counted. And I suppose most people who vote do want the vote to be counted. So the law says that you can send the request in by email, you'll get the ballot and you can vote it, but you need to postal mail or courier the hard copy. And it needs to arrive by election day in order for your vote to count. Well, New York has decided that this year, they're going to count the ballots anyway if that hard copy doesn't arrive, because they do know that there are problems out there. So you should still send it, but you shouldn't be nervous that if it doesn't get there in time, your vote won't count. Yeah, Esther, you shook your head. Is that?
Yeah, no, because you have to get the hard copy in. Well, I'll talk more about New York afterwards, but you're absolute, there's a couple of little sticking points there.
All right. Okay. Well, I hope that I'm giving you the information that we have received most recently from Board of Elections in New York, is that for this year, the hard copy, it needs to be sent, but if it doesn't arrive, the vote still should be counted. All right. So back to a little bit more information about Vote from Abroad, if I may. You can fill out the request form in English or Spanish. I'm including both links. We have instructions there if you need an emergency write-in ballot. And in most cases, at this point, you don't, because you can get the ballot by email, since ballots started to be sent out 45 days before, which was September 19th. On our website, you can find the deadlines for your state, you can find the rules, and you can find that important contact information for your election officials, so you know how to email them and phone them and fax them. We have an excellent FAQs. You can find links on the state pages on how to track your ballot in your state. It will take you to the website of your state, but it will show you how to track the ballot. And then importantly, of course, is this help desk at the red bubble on every screen where you can ask questions. And then I would say also, I don't know you know, what your situation is with students and professors and other people that are overseas. And I'm sure there's been a lot of, you know, chaos and it's all in flux. But if you would like us to have hold for you one-on-one voting assistance at any time on Zoom, we're doing that all around the world. And we've got lots of volunteers. So we'd be happy to really sit down with voters if you'd like us to. I don't know if I really have time to look at all these numbers, and I've already talked about the important ones. Here are some of the challenges that we face as people abroad that want to help other Americans vote. How do you find them? That's the toughest. That is the challenge, finding Americans. After you find them, informing and assisting is actually pretty easy. But this is what we do. We use a lot of social media, digital ads. We set up tables wherever we can. That, of course, was frozen for a while, but we're back on the streets now, like this, usually. Can you read my vote from abroad mask?
Yes.
All right. We hand out cards like these. Everybody's got them in their pocket. Anytime you hear a US accent on the street, we have posters that we put around city centers, do a lot of, now anyway, you know, earned media, get into the press whenever we can. We're doing some print and radio ads. We're putting some signs up on buses and trams and subways. We attend marches and rallies on events where we know that Americans will be there. And for this year, for the first time, we have a voting champions program where we're urging everybody, and I'm urging everybody on this call, whether you're abroad or in the United States, tell 5 other people to get registered and vote. Deadlines are coming up everywhere in every state. So every vote counts, and spread the word. And I don't think I have any more slides, but maybe I have one more, Trevor. Okay, that's a whole bunch of links. That's where you find the request form. That's where you find the state's information, that write-in absentee ballot, both the government link and ours. At the bottom here, I've got Ballotpedia, which is a great place to go no matter where you are to see what's on your ballot, to read more about the candidates and the initiatives. And then here's our social media channels for Vote From Abroad. And then finally, on the right side at the bottom, everybody can go to iwillvote.com to check your registration status, to find out, are you on the list, whether you're in the US or you're abroad. So thank you very much. Please do vote, and please do let us know if we can help any overseas voters.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for a great, clear presentation. We will share the slides with everybody, but thank you for the work that you do. It really is so incredibly important, especially at this moment. Okay, Tom, share with us your personal experience, how important you think it is to vote from abroad. You're an American citizen, so is your wife, and you're both in Rio de Janeiro. So tell us briefly your experience.
Thank you so much, Safwan, and Katie and the other speakers. A pleasure to be with you today. So I wish I'd heard Katie's presentation, Safwan, before the last couple of weeks and months when I was trying, my wife and I trying very much to vote. And some of the problems are in the details that I think Katie may come back and address, Safwan. I think you'll appreciate this. Calling them up. I mean, it sounds simple if you're in New Jersey, but if you're in Brazil, calling is not always an option. And if it is, it's extremely expensive. And also mail. Again, you're in New Jersey, you go to the local post office and mail it to New York City, no problem. The whole system, I think, doesn't take into account the real world of most Americans living abroad where mails are unreliable, especially during a pandemic. So I just want to start out by saying that. But Saf, when you asked me to share my personal experience, I see where you are now. You've just got your ballot. I've been through that already. I know what it's taken to get there, and you're not done yet, but I can maybe help you a little bit about it. So I wanted to describe my own personal plan to make sure my vote was counted. I think I would do it any year, and I always have. But living abroad here in Brazil in particular, it gives every American a kind of a unique perspective on the importance of the US and the world. And people here in Brazil follow politics in the United States very closely, and with very good reason. Their own economy and their society are affected by how wisely and predictably the United States exercises its global leadership role. And Brazilians are constantly mystified, as I'm sure Jordanians are, Safwan, and others around the world, mystified by the complexities of our electoral system. Here it's one person, one vote, 50% plus one of the valid votes, you win. the system is fully automated. It's the same in all 27 Brazilian states.
Yeah, I'm in a part of the world where usually the voting is one man or one person, one vote, one time.
One time, right? So the results of the voting are immediate within an hour or so of the closing of the polls all over the country, and no one disputes the results. So I have a lot of explaining to do, as I'm sure those of you living abroad do as well, when the US electoral system is being discussed. So all of these things came together to make me particularly motivated to vote this year, and determined not to be deterred, although my courage sometimes flagged, I must admit. The US consulate, which sometimes in the past when I moved abroad has been a place of refuge, you can go and people will actually facilitate your vote, but it's not only barricaded behind all sorts of barriers, as most consulates are around the world, but it's closed now due to the pandemic. So that closes off a natural channel for someone living abroad. So I started, as Safwan told you, by requesting a ballot from New York State to vote, and I've learned immediately some of the problems you need to overcome. New York State, now it's changed a bit, and Katie has brought us up to speed on that, but New York State wants original signatures and didn't accept it in the beginning. When I started the process, I didn't think it accepted email ballot requests or ballot returns. That's been modified, so I don't want to mislead people in the case of New York State, but it shouldn't have. It's kind of being modified on the fly. Regular mail, here's the key point between Brazilian and New York, may take weeks even in good times. And in the pandemic, mail is not being delivered for weeks at a time. You get 3 monthly bank statements here at once these days, for example, and it's not surprising. So an express mail, courier mail, call it what you will, is very expensive. It seems like a sort of poll tax. So Katie mentioned 35 euros. Well, here I paid the equivalent of $65 twice. Not everybody can or is willing to do that or thinks that's right to do that, but that's what I did. And then there's also some minor issues that you need to overcome. Maybe it's in you. I don't think it's just in my head, by the way. I think it's a real issue. I had no confidence that the actual ballot that would be returned to me would be correctly addressed with Brazilian street addresses and names that are often mangled by US senders. The same happens in reverse. So when I did get through and did call the Varick Street Board of Elections, as Safwan mentioned, it didn't seem to me that a solitary American citizen in a faraway country, he seemed to be very far from their minds. That's not what they think of as an absentee voter. And I certainly knew that New York State wouldn't be sending me anything by express delivery. I could just see that ballot, Safwan coming back to me with improper postage and a mangled return address to me, thrown down a mail chute in New York, never to be seen again. So I heard the rules have changed. Katie has reassured me that they've changed, but I didn't trust the new system. So I not only emailed in my ballot request, which Safwan verifies works, but I also went to the local FedEx office, paid the handsome sum, and I did send the request to Varick Street in New York City. Some weeks later, just as Safwan did, but I did weeks before he did. We mailed about the same, we did this about the same time, but weeks ago I received the instructions on how to download my ballot. Great, so I think what they were reacting to was the courier delivery that I had paid for. But the way I read it, and Safwan, you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong, you can't email back in the signed ballot. You have to download it, as Safwan has done. You have to mark your ballot, that's the easy part. You have to sign it, and then you even have, and Safwan showed it briefly on the screen, you even have to put together your own envelope, actually 2 envelopes, from 2 envelope templates they have sent you. So it's fold 1, fold 2, fold 3, fold 4, and then you tape it all together. That's it. That was the folding and the taping were the hardest parts. I hope I'm wrong in that, Katie or Esther, and you can correct me, but it was like a 3rd grade art project for my wife and I sitting side by side to do that over in the dining room table. So finally, I took the envelopes, one inside the other, 1 envelope for each, but each of us sending in 2 envelopes, back to my local FedEx office here in Rio de Janeiro, paid the money again, and make sure I held onto that tracking slip and tracked the shipment every day. FedEx says it was delivered to Varick Street, but what will happen next? I trust, I hope, but I'm not yet I'm not fully assured, but I did everything, Katie and Safwan, I did everything I think I could possibly do. So I just finished with this personal experience. Maybe it has a happy ending. I hope it does. But shouldn't it be easier to vote from abroad? No wonder only such a small proportion of voters like Katie tells us vote. So New York State, let's start with you. Why don't we change that? Because as Safwan told us at the beginning, every vote matters. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tom. That's a great transition to Esther, but let me just comment on what would be a happy ending, a happy outcome. I think we all, I don't think I'm allowed to say, but I'm going to say it. I mean, there's only one happy ending in sight, and we're going to get there. Right, Esther?
Absolutely.
So, Esther, tell us about New York voting.
Okay, I am going to see if I...
Yeah, and maybe you can address even students in particular.
Yes, yes. So first of all, Columbia has a great history of ensuring that students get access to the ballot and really try and vote. And the project that I run for the last 12 years was initiated by a former undergraduate of mine at Columbia University who you know, Safwan, William von Muffling.
Oh, of course.
And
of course.
he was the one who inspired who'sontheballot.org. And if I can share this screen, I think it'll be easy. There it is. So Katie's work is extraordinary. So I just want to say that. Thank you, Katie. That's national work and it needs to be done. People need to have a place to go to get this kind of information. Because of the New York City craziness and difficulties that actually, I have to tell everybody, have improved. We, in the last legislative session at the state legislature, by the way, it's the states that control this madness for those students of American politics who are interested in that. We don't have a unitary system in the United States for deciding how to vote and and those kinds of questions. Every state runs it their own way, and that's created some of the complexities and interesting and eccentric variations, and also variations that are much more pernicious, that are designed to suppress the vote, actually. So the ease, and I know Safwan has had this question for me, but the ease in which people can vote really varies dramatically from state to state. There's been some research on that, which I found really interesting because he asked me, I saw the question in advance, and it turns out that Oregon is the easiest state to vote in, and Mississippi is the worst. And if anybody's interested, we can talk more about that. But I'd like to go to the nuts and bolts because that's what people are most concerned with now. And as I said, the national websites and links and of course the organization that Katie runs is really excellent. If you're a New York City voter, this is only for New York City voters, which many of our Columbia students have registered to vote in New York, then I would recommend who'sontheballot.org. It's very easy. As you can see, you just go to Who's on the Ballot. And this was expressly designed to do two things: to make it easy for people to register to vote, to vote absentee, and also to get information about candidates on their ballot once that was determined. It's nonpartisan, so I want to be clear about that. And it has, the front page is the poll locator, where you find out who's on your ballot, and you just pop in your building, your address and your borough, because as Katie pointed out, in New York City we have 5 boroughs, and that actually impacts how you request information about voting. But the most important thing, right, and then you hit this See My Ballot, and it tells you everybody, and then you can click through and see all the candidates, and then click on them and get the nonpartisan information. But obviously you need your ballot in order to do this. So we're still at this stage, and what we have been doing, and this is really speaks to what Safwan was saying about the importance of this election, and some of the difficulties and roadblocks that have emerged from from the President of the United States, you know, sort of dismantling the post office before the election and actually calling into question the legitimacy of the election. And in an unprecedented way for New York, where, as those of you who follow New York City politics know how difficult it is to engage anything and anyone in coalitions, I've been part of a coalition that was created by the Mayor's Democracy Initiative and the New York City Campaign Finance Board, in which we've worked very hard together with the Board of Elections, which is not a city agency, and the city doesn't control it, and that's part of the problem, to get information and to create what we're calling an FAQ, frequently asked questions, about the 2020 election. And so if you go to Who's on the Ballot and you click under recent news, this FAQ, that will provide for you pretty much every single question you have, the answers to it. And what is really, from my point of view, great about this, you just don't have to remember every single link and every single website and every single phone number. Everything is here. And I'm going to start very quickly with, are you registered to vote? Because that's the first thing you have to check. Because you may think you're registered, but if you're not, you have a problem. And here's the good news. Today in New York State is the last day to register to be eligible for the current presidential election. So if you go on, the only way this can work for you effectively at this point, I think, is if you have a driver's license. You can only register online in New York through the Motor Vehicle Bureau. And that, so you would just click on this online link, and it would take you to the DMV, and you can actually fill out that form online, and it's easy. Otherwise, you have to get a form and you have to mail it. And you have to mail it to the County Board of Elections, which in New York City, there are 5, because our 5 boroughs once were counties, way too much New York City history. But the good piece about this is it's clear, it's simple, it gets you to where you want to go, as long as you know your address in New York, okay? So, and eligibility for registration is listed here as well. And then if you want to just find out if you're registered, you can click this online thing about finding out if you're registered. As I said, today is the deadline for registration, and the County Board of Elections has to receive this mail-in by October 14th. So, you know, this is difficult for people abroad, but those are the deadlines. Now, if you know, I won't go through if you moved, but I will go through vote by mail, because that's the most important thing. And Katie has actually explained, I think, very well a lot of the very specific things in New York. So here's the really great thing, and Tom, I could have saved you a lot of trouble. And we've been trying to push this out to faculty and students at Columbia, but we push it out all over New York City to help people. And I get emails, personal emails from all my colleagues. These are brilliant people who, so students out there and faculty out there, don't feel bad if you're having trouble. These are brilliant people who I get, Esther, where am I going? How do I get there? Can I drop off my absentee ballot somewhere? What do I do? I mean, I won't give any names because Safwan and Tom know these people, but the reality is it is so much more complicated than it should be, to be perfectly honest. But having said that, I feel like, you know, we're going in the right direction in New York, at least. So is all you have to do now to request an absentee ballot abroad is get on your computer and do it. If you are going to do it through the, you know, you need the window now. We're already up against deadlines. You have to, as Katie said, you have to request your absentee ballot by October 27th. But the idea is you have to do it as soon as possible, because you do have to mail back the form, as Tom has told you. You have to send in a hard ballot. It has to be signed. You have to follow the instructions. As Katie said, we had some screwy things happen here with the print up of the ballot. 100,000 people in Brooklyn got a ballot with the wrong name on it. They've corrected that. But I'm glad to hear, Katie, that if you're abroad, you can send in what you received and it'll be accepted. So if you click on to request an absentee ballot, you can do it online now. And that is the thing I recommend highly at this point. And do it directly through the New York City website. If you're a New York State resident, we have the New York State Board of Elections in which you can do it through. But it's nycabsentee.com, or just click this little link by requesting an absentee ballot. So that's the best way to go. If you want to call, you can call. If you want to fax, you can fax. Here are the phone numbers: 1-866-VOTE-NYC. And they pick up. They absolutely do most of the time. But frankly, the thing to do is just go online. And the thing about it is, as I said, you've got to send that ballot back. And what Katie was saying in terms of counting the ballot is that they did change their position, which is they will count all ballots even if they arrive after Election Day. In New York, they don't start counting the ballot till the day after Election Day for absentee ballots. That's different in other states, where they start counting absentee ballots the minute they arrive. That clearly should be changed. So the key here is to do it immediately. Do it today. Do everything you have to do today. Get it done. And part of the issue around absentee ballots is, not just our president confusing everybody about vote by mail, but also because of COVID, in states where people normally do vote in person, people are choosing absentee ballots. And that has, to a certain extent, overwhelmed the Board of Elections, and we hope it won't overwhelm the post office. And that's the point, I think, that's very scary to people who follow electoral politics, but also to an ordinary citizen who wants their vote to count. So for New Yorkers, what's on the ballot? We've got everything on the ballot, folks. Now, it's a big election for us, top to bottom. Obviously, you should vote for the presidency and Congress, but please, please, please vote for local public officials. That's part of the reason we created Who's on the Ballot. Sometimes local public officials have a lot more to do with your life than you can possibly imagine. So once you get your ballot, come back to Who's on the Ballot, put in your New York City address, and then click See My Ballot. And then you can get quick information just about who these people are and what these offices are about. And I just want to reiterate what Safwan was saying earlier. This is a very, very important election. And despite the fact that we have this complex system for electing a president through the Electoral College, and people may think, oh, some states are red states and some states are blue states, and therefore, what's the point? It's not true. Each one of your votes counts. And I would say, however, given the Electoral College, if you live in what we call a purple state, which is a swing state, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, now Texas and Arizona and Florida are all in play. If you live in any of those states, even though I'm giving the information for New York here, and I implore you to vote wherever you are, please vote. It is, people say vote like your life depends upon it. Well, by the way, it does.
It does, doesn't it? It does.
Yes.
It does. And this is why a lot of non-US citizens who are friends, whom we're living with, want to vote, because the whole world future depends on this vote. And even in the blue states, Esther, right? I mean, it is not
Yes.
only the importance of having your voice heard, the popular vote, even though the election is based on the electoral colleges, the popular vote matters also.
The popular vote absolutely matters. This is a signal to our elected officials.
Thank you.
Everybody gets data from public opinion polls, or what is called exit polls, about which groups voted. And while whoever wins represents all of us in theory, they tend to pay more attention to the groups of people who vote. So from that perspective, you really want to demonstrate that you're part of a group of people that vote. And every single person has an interest in this election. There isn't a person from any group that doesn't.
Yeah. So let's deal with, thank you, Esther. Thank you very much. Let's deal with a couple of questions that we have. And I just want to remind everyone that we will email you with a link to the recording, and we will share the slides that Katie used. Any email addresses, what have you, and please distribute that, share that with your friends, wherever they are in the world, and please, please, please encourage them to vote. So one question is from a college scene. Sorry, go ahead, Katie.
Can I ask Esther a quick question? Thank
Yes.
you so much for this presentation, and I'm going to explore the website. It really looks excellent. My question is, when you describe the process to go to the Board of Elections to get the absentee ballot, is this for New Yorkers who are still in the US, or is also used by those abroad? And if so, how is the ballot sent out to people?
Yes, so this is for New Yorkers who anywhere, because it's the same process for sending out the ballot. You make that request, and then you have to tell them where you want the ballot to be sent. So
Okay.
the ballot, you can fill that in.
And
so
it's sent only by postal mail, the ballot?
No, the ballot now, it can be downloaded. Then
I got my instructions through
the request for the ballot to be downloaded. Then you fill it out, and then it gets sent. That gets sent through postal mail.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's so overseas citizens can use that process that you described.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I want to just point out that if you use that form, the FPCA form, as a federal voter, you have a privilege that those people using the regular absentee ballot process don't. And
That's
that privilege is, if you ask for your ballot to be emailed to you, they have to do it. The law is
very important
in every state, but that's the only federal law that we got passed in 2010.
If you send me that,
Yeah.
I'll put it up on our website.
So that's the difference, that they will send it to you by email if you use that form. And for some people that's easier, for some it's not. Some people can't navigate downloading something. So just to keep that in mind.
Right, and some people can't fill the form out online. So but I would appreciate it, if you sent me that link, and I'll add it to our instructions so I can include the overseas folks.
Okay.
We need to have that here. It's crazy that you can't fill out the form online,
Well, the point that you made is so really critical, is most voting law in the United States is state law.
Right.
And that every state does it differently. And, if you're going to ask for what improvements we need, if we could have more federal legislation, defining how to run elections, protecting the vote, it would only be positive. And if it could make things simpler for everybody, but what a challenge that would be. Okay, sorry, Safran.
That's okay. We had a couple of questions. We only have a couple of minutes left. So a student who is a college senior, who's an American citizen, but is in Luxembourg, which is where he was raised, and that's his home address. They tried registering, but they needed a state ID. To sign up for a state ID, you need a social security card, which they do not have. They tried signing up for one, but that was not verified. Can that person get any help?
Wow.
Is that for me? Because yes, that's another beauty of using, if you try to use a state website or a state process, I know in some states you'll get stuck if you don't have a driver's license or a state ID. Louisiana is one. If you use that FPCA form, it will ask you, do you have a social security number? You can say no. Do you have a driver's license? No. It will ask you, put down either one of these, and then it will tell you, if you don't have either one, check this box and continue. You're not required to have a social security number to vote from abroad. You're not required to have a driver's license. But if you use a state website, you'll get stuck. So I would really
Although in New York
go to the FPCA.
There's no requirements in New York State or New York City.
Yeah.
But I would go Katie's route. I think it's safer. But there shouldn't be any roadblocks in the New York City or New York State site on ID laws. We don't have ID laws here.
What it used to say on the federal, on that FPCA is it used to say, if you don't have either one, your state will create a voter ID for you. It doesn't say that anymore, but that indeed is what happens. Once someone registers to vote like that, they will be, an ID number will be created for them in the system, and that will always pop up again when they register with their same data.
Thank you. Next question is, can my family send my ballot request if I sign and send to them? Yeah.
Absolutely. They can send the ballot request or the ballot itself?
I guess the ballot request is what this person is
asking. The ballot request doesn't have to be signed.
Yeah.
The ballot itself has to be signed.
Right. But if you sign the ballot itself and you send it to somebody in the US who mails it for you, that's fine too.
Yes,
right?
They have to either mail it for you or do in the states which require a drop off. They can drop it off for you too in the drop off locations.
Question refers to the problem that the mails are not easy. So I thought of that too, sending my ballot to my daughter and had my daughter forward it. So I think a lot of people living abroad have that same problem. Then it's the unreliability of the mails.
Yeah, but I think, Tom, you solved it the best way. I should have said earlier, for the countries that do not have a reliable mail system right now, courier is the best way. DHL and FedEx have just been giving discounts for ballots. But if you're going to use that anyway, don't courier it to a relative and then have them drop it or mail it. You're just adding a step. Courier right to the election official at a street address. If you see the P.O. box address, they won't deliver there. So you have to look up and make sure you have the right street address. But and also, I don't know New York, I can pull up a list. There are 5 states where it's a felony for someone else to touch a voted ballot. So in some cases, you cannot mail it to a friend or family. And we need to know what those 5 states are. But if you're going to be mailing it or couriering it, don't add a step. Go right to the election official.
And I think there was just a court case that's about to knock down that law.
We're out of time, but let's just try to address things. So Barryham is asking, what would make a vote from abroad not be counted? I mean, I think that is something that we could have an entire webinar on. So please forgive us, Barryham, that we'll skip over that.
Safwan, can I just say being late? That's the number one reason that they're not counted. Year after year. Do it now. It's being late.
Also in New York, it was always signatures too.
Another attendee said the ballot I downloaded for Tennessee requires signature but no witness. That's true for New York as well. So that's easy. And then finally, there's a postdoc, Columbia postdoc with New Zealand and UK citizenship. Glad to see Columbia encouraging voting. Obviously, that student or postdoc cannot vote. What can you do to help support democracy other than voting in these important times? There are a million things to do, and I would encourage you to go to votefromabroad.org, Katie's organization, and volunteer to help. And also, Katie has just put in, tell all the Americans that you know to vote, Okay, tell them
So
to
you
vote.
can sign on and you can text message or email your networks. And that's a really great way if you want to help specific candidates to go on their website and be part of a GeoVote, get out the vote operation.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Tom. Thanks to all of our participants. Let's get out the vote.
Great to see
Let's
you,
vote.
Safwan.
Great to
And
see
Tom,
you,
have a
Esther.
nice
I
day.
miss you. Okay.
Miss you too. Bye.
Bye.
Vote, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now. Thank you, Katie. Bye now.